So today we're going to be looking at a scenario where a border skirmish happens along the Korean border or the DMZ. So first, what happens is a North Korean refugee is trying to escape by sea by using the Sea of Japan. Because they heard it's because after using lots of sources from the limited research they can have, they have been able to figure out South Korea will be sending a cargo ship right through here, so they can do some diplomatic stuff with North Korea. So the refugee instantly uses the sea to try to get across and escape to the south. Um, Although this erupts in conflict, as once the refugee gets on the boat, North Korean soldiers start firing, which leads to South Korean soldiers firing back and causing them to actually go onto the land of North Korea to try to just do whatever they can. So now we have the skirmish happening. It's not full on war, and both countries have requested their allies stay out of it. So first we have South Korea putting in a deadly push through the DMZ to try to reach Pyongyang to capture it. The original landing is eventually recaptured by North Korea, and the North Korean army tries to push down as much as they can. They especially try over in the exposed position of South Korea. Now, South Korea is in a bit of an unfortunate position because, if you don't know, Pyongyang's right there, which is the capital of North Korea, and the capital of South Korea, Seoul, is right here. South Korea also manages to capture one of the nukes that it can nuke Seoul in 45 seconds. If you didn't know, that's a real nuke that North Korea has. So they're able to capture it just before North Korea considers launching it. South Korea continues to push up the North Korean borders, discovering even more horrible things that the government has done. Eventually, the North Korean army decides not to take over Seoul because they know it's going to be heavily defended, and they decide to subvert expectations by pushing down South Korea and splitting the country into two. With this, we have South Korea wanting to call on its allies, but again, they really can't because they already set up the agreement. So with this, we have after a push from South Korea is made, we have them withdrawing troops, which means North Korea can push back, so they can go liberate themselves. With this, we have South Korea pushing the North Koreans out of Seoul and cutting the North Korean army into two, allowing them to reconnect with themselves. Eventually, the troops are encircled and are pushed back up to the DMZ. The sides are locked in a stalemate for about a few months. So eventually, we see the deadlock being broken after South Korea sends their troops through a deadly minefield. Um, Seeing the severity of this whole situation, Kim Jong Un goes to a very secret hideout, which is around right here. And he's doing this so he's not captured if they get to Pyongyang, because no one knows where he's actually hiding except himself and a few family members. So with this, we have South Korea continuing their push up against the weak North Korean army. We also have some support countries being in this whole ordeal. So for the support of North Korea, we have China and Russia. We also have Mongolia forced into it, as well as Kazakhstan, Pakistan, and Afghanistan. Um, for the South Korean support countries, we see some of their famous allies, this being the United States, Canada. We also see Mexico deciding to jump in on this, as well as Brazil. We have India getting in on it. We also have Vietnam in it, and Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia don't want to join in on this because they'll probably get clapped by Vietnam. We also have Taiwan declaring itself as a support country, which, you know, so they kind of want a little out of this. Um, so decide, screw it, let's just give them some stuff. We also have the Philippines declaring themselves as a support country for South Korea, as well as Australia and New Zealand. We see almost all of Europe except for Serbia, also declaring that they're a support country for South Korea. We have Iceland sending in some mild support, and and there's one country that's like in Africa's allies with Russia. Libya. All right, screw it, Libya. Why not? With this whole thing with Russia declaring as a support country for the North, we have Libya getting involved, which ends in a bit of a chain reaction with different African countries declaring their support for either side. So and now it's just a mess. This is getting out of hand. What has happened? Now even there's no direct conflict. This means that there is some fighting that's engaging over troops around these areas. So it's not going too well. But yeah, just as we see a lot of countries declaring support for either side. With China and Russia being on the side of North Korea, we have South Africa joining in because of BRICS, and Brazil is set to leave from BRICS. So now that alliance is just BRICS. Go figure. We have the surrounding countries of South Africa deciding to declare themselves support for South Korea, and overall we see more South Korean support. Um, over in the actual part of the video, we can see South Korea continuing to push up into the north. Now their plan is to cut off the two sides and encircle Pyongyang. North Korea decides to build up their troops though. North Korea launches a massive counteroffensive using everything they have, encouraging their civilian population who believes that Kim Jong Un is a literal god to rise up against the South Korean occupiers. So here we see some guerrilla pockets as well, or partisans. Now, South Korea is getting good, pretty greatly pushed back here. That's just because they don't really want to fight the North Korean citizens. Um, but once the North Korean but Kim Jong Un allows certain tracked North Korean citizens to have firearms, and at that point we have South Korea no longer resisting no longer taking anything from the civilians. South Korea is feeling extremely guilty about this though, as but they reach out to the UN saying like, "Hey, this is why we're doing this. Please don't sanction us, God." And I forgot to call on Japan because, of course, I did. So yeah, we also have Japan as a support country. With this, we have like a stocked armed army around Kim Jong Un's defense position, although it's somewhat minor because it has to be secretive. We see North Korea continuing their push down, but then we see South Korea finally being able to fully mobilize, and they push into Pyongyang, taking the capital city. So now, with the most important city in North Korea being captured, we have the country starting to collapse as it's split into two once again. Or for the first time, now South Korea that was split first. Let's see first. With this, we see the collapse of the western part, and we have Kim Jong Un's hideout being eventually found out. It is then stormed and secured. So with this, we can see the continuing push until eventually North Korea is finally gone forever. So there's a small little part, but it's eventually squeezed out. So the peace treaty is pretty basic. We're after the Allies declaring their 100% they're going to be heavily financing South Korea to rebuild North Korea because it's going to take like over $1 trillion supposedly if they were to reunite under South Korean control to like make everything better. So with this, we just see a unified Korea, but we are going to be seeing something strange. So obviously we have South Korea designed to expand territorially and 100%ly, but we just pretend the rest of that's colored in. But we do see an Allied occupied zone right over here, just to sort of keep it in check until they eventually